especially the storytelling part, because people learn through story. Human beings learn through story. Every movie is set up the same way. It's set up in the same story arc. So we do learn through stories. What is happening, podcast people? Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University. I hope you enjoyed our latest episode. It was episode number 3, Understanding Your Ideal Listener. So it is very important to understand who you're talking to, because if you don't know who, it is very hard to know how. Today, for episode number 4, a simple framework for powerful solo episodes. How do I know what to say when I am recording alone? I never realized that it was easier for most people to interview. So we started our podcast as a solo episode, and there's 2 of us. So there's Alan and myself. So there's always been a kind of back and forth. But I think solo episodes are actually a lot easier than interviews. And we've actually gone from doing 6 solo episodes a week to 7 solo episodes a week. So we actually aren't even doing guest interviews anymore. But one of the most common questions I get asked by clients or when I'm doing free calls is, how do you make sure you're doing valuable solo episodes and you're not saying the same things over and over? What is the framework? How do you do it? And over our 1,000 episodes, I think we're at 1,031 as of today, we've tried a lot of different things. We've tried bringing whiteboards. We've had notebooks. I actually have a notebook right here next to me, but I'm not using it for this. We've tried a lot of different things. And the thing that we landed on is a simple framework that you can put on a Google Doc right in front of you. You can put it on a notebook. You can put it on a whiteboard. That is what we did in the beginning. We used to have a whiteboard behind the camera, but I'm going to walk you through what we do in our quote-unquote solo episodes, as well as what I'm actually doing in this episode. So I will actually take you through the process of, okay, how did I come up with what I'm going to talk about today? And then how did I frame that out to make it as valuable as humanly possible? And then also, full disclosure, I have done 1,000 episodes with a co-host. So the solo episodes for me are actually a good challenge because it's different. I don't have somebody to pitch and catch with. I don't have somebody to bounce ideas off of. There's nobody here to hold space while I look things up. So this is definitely a different experience for me. It's fun. I think it's probably more challenging, honestly, than doing guest interviews, because there's a lot that can go wrong and it's all on you. So I want to throw that out there, that I am going through this part of the journey with you because I am very used to doing episodes with somebody else on the other side of the microphone. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. And if you see me looking down, if you're on YouTube, you won't know this if you're listening on audio, but if you see me looking down, I actually have a Google Doc that I have in front of me that has all of the things I'm going to talk about today. So don't feel bad if you have to have some sort of quote-unquote cheat sheet, whether it's a whiteboard, whether it's a Google Doc, again, a notebook, whatever it may be, just something that's priming your mind for what you're going to say next. You don't have to go off of it word by word, but if you do lose yourself in a thought, it can help you catch yourself and make sure that you get back on the path that you're trying to go down. Okay. So this is my thought process when it comes to creating an episode. So we have different, I would say, let's just say different bullet points. Okay. So we have a hook, a story, a lesson, a future pace, a question, an action, and then a call to action. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through those. So this is how we outline our episodes. First, it starts with a hook. And let me preface this also. Our podcast is a self-improvement podcast. And it relies heavily on storytelling and it relies heavily on lessons. Now, again, if you have a comedy podcast, it's going to be completely different. A simple framework for powerful solo comedy episodes is going to be funny. Tell jokes, tell funny stories. It's all going to depend on the genre of the podcast that you are creating and that you're trying to grow. This is for somebody who is trying to add value. Maybe it's not education, but it's through storytelling. That's the best way to explain it, because if you're doing something that's maybe sports or music or current events, it's not going to land the same way, because that's not why people are coming to you. They're not necessarily coming to you for stories. They're coming to you for knowledge, and or education. So it's an interesting thing, but hopefully I'll be able to explain how it'll work for you while I go through this framework. So number one, hook. If you've ever heard somebody say, hey, I had the wildest thing happen to me this week, that's a hook. You're thinking to yourself, well, I want to know more. I need to know more. People on social media do a really good job of this with the first line of the verbiage in their post. It might say something along the lines of, you'll never believe what happened to me this weekend. And then you're thinking, okay, I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know more. So let me just look at, okay, the hook that I had for episode number 3, Understanding Your Ideal Listener, is the one I said at the beginning. If you don't know who, it's hard to know how. That was my hook for that episode. So you might think, okay, that's an interesting sentence. That's an interesting thought process. I'd like to know more. The main purpose of the hook is to get people hooked to listen. There's such a limited amount of time you have before you capture somebody's attention. This is why you just hammer through people's stories on Instagram, because if it doesn't capture your attention right away, you're not going to stick around. That's another big piece of advice I give people, is make sure you're getting right into your episode as quickly as humanly possible. I don't know. I'll have to check. And if not, this is something I'll start doing. But on Next Level University, our other podcast, we have pre-rolls where it'll be 15 seconds of me saying something valuable, 15 seconds of Alan saying something valuable, intro episode. Because we want to start with value. We want to start with something that might capture your attention and say, okay, let me actually listen to this. All I'm saying with that is it's very important to deliver value as quickly as humanly possible. So your hook is doing that. Your hook is bringing people in, and then your story is the next part. So, okay, my hook is, as I mentioned, if you don't know who, it's hard to know how. That was my hook from the last episode. After your hook comes story. So this is, and it can be a number of different options, but this is where you're going to go into a story about somebody who has struggled with what you're talking about. Maybe it's yourself, maybe it's a client, maybe it's a TV character, or whatever it may be. The point of the story is to show some progress. It's to show some sort of growth. It's to show how the lesson that you're bringing helps somebody in a story. So my story in this episode was hard because it kind of comes from our experience, right? My story is, well, we've done this for 1,000 episodes, and we were trying to figure out how can we make the most valuable episodes possible, but how do we also create a framework that we can use every single time? Then it became more valuable when we started getting clients, myself particularly. When I started getting podcast clients, people would come and say, okay, how do I record solo episodes and I don't get lost? I don't go off track. I know exactly what I'm saying. This is when I really, really, really started using it. So I probably would have a better story usually, but it's very hard to tell stories based on podcasts. It's a challenging thing. So for you, you might say something about, so maybe your hook is, imagine what would be possible for you if you were truly confident. Imagine if that was your hook. Okay, cool. Imagine what would be possible for you if you were truly confident. The story after that hook would be something along the lines of, I remember when blank. I remember when I was in high school and I really wanted to try out for the JV football team or the JV soccer team or the JV field hockey team, and I just didn't feel confident enough to do it. And I went to one of my friends and I said, hey, I'd really like to do this, but I don't think I'm good enough. And my friend gave me this really simple tip that helped me a lot. Here's the tip. That's your story. Then when you're talking about the tip, you're going into lesson. Okay, so the hook, the story. Okay, we have those two down. Now the lesson. This is the real value of the episode. This is the real takeaway that you want the listeners to have. This is what they're going to use to improve their lives, or this is what they're going to use to raise their awareness, or this is what they're going to use to learn something new. So the lesson in this episode is the framework. So the lesson is Hook, story, lesson, future pace, question, action, call to action. That is the lesson. That is what I want you to take away from this episode. That is my goal. And the reason I'm telling it as I go through and I'm saying this was my hook, this was my story, this was my lesson, the reason I'm taking you behind the scenes is because that's kind of the story for this episode as well. So that's why I'm doing it. I want you to see it done in real time. Now, again, it's very challenging to do it on a podcast about podcasts. So if you want to hear a good representation of this, go listen to any of our latest episodes at Next Level U. This is what I'm always trying to do, especially the storytelling part, because people learn through story. Human beings learn through story. Every movie is set up the same way. It's set up in the same story arc. So we do learn through stories. So that is the lesson. The lesson is the value that I want you to take away. It's the thing that I want you to use in your life. That's the best way to explain it. If you forget the story, if you forget the hook, if you forget anything else, that's okay. I want you to take the lesson with you, and that is the value. So for me, it's the hook, story, lesson, future pace, question, ask, action, call to action, Okay. After we do that, what's next? The next thing is future pace. So what a future pace is this is the result that you can expect if you take the lesson that I just gave you and you run with it. So my future pace in this episode that I was going to use would be this. Imagine knowing the exact flow. Imagine knowing exactly what you should be setting up in your next episode. How much certainty would you have if you had a framework to follow every single time and you could just focus on improving that and you're not leaving much up to luck or chance or your imagination? Imagine the certainty that that would bring you. So that's my future pace. Future pace is basically imagine if you implement what I just taught you, how much better would your life be? That's the thought process about a future pace. An idea or an example of a place that uses all of these really well is an infomercial. Infomercials use these really, really well.
Hi, my name's John Laurito, and I just wanted to give a big shout out to Kevin Palmieri. I had reached out to him. He had been referred to me when I had shared with a friend of mine some interest in doing a podcast, and he said, you've got to use Kevin. He's fantastic. He's the best around. He'll get you started and off the ground and soaring high in no time. And take it from somebody who knows nothing about podcasting other than maybe saying a few things. But as far as behind the scenes, the startup, everything, I knew nothing. Kevin was phenomenal in terms of leading me through the whole process, and not just easy to work with, but really, really knows his stuff. A great combination between leading me through all the stuff I had no idea what I was doing, but also really listening to me and understanding what it was I was trying to accomplish and what my vision is. So whether you're looking for somebody to help you and get you started, or somebody, as I've done, where I'm putting it entirely in his hands because I've got total trust and confidence in him, and he is a true pro and easy to work with, any of those ends of the spectrum, you're going to have a lot of success and a lot of fun working with Kevin. Trust me. Thanks.
A future pace for an infomercial might be something like, imagine the next time that you cook eggs on a pan, you don't have eggs that stick at all. And you can just throw it in the dishwasher and it'll come out clean. That's a future pace. Imagine if blank in the future, okay? After the future pace, we have a question. So one of the upsides of podcasting is you get to talk into a microphone whenever you want from anywhere in the world. One of the potential downsides is you're not directly talking to your audience. You're not directly engaging with them, and you're not really asking them questions and getting answers. So we like to add a question in there as a little bit of something that will create action. And I know there's action in here too, but the question is something along the lines of, how are you setting up your episode now? That's the question I would ask you here. Are you just showing up to the microphone hoping for the best? Do you have a framework? Are you afraid to do solo episodes, so you're actually not doing them because you don't know what to say? All the question is just to continue to raise awareness. It's to get you to ask yourself questions and then hopefully take new action, okay? After the question, we have action. So my action in this episode would be, and this would be me saying it to you, I want you to take out a notebook, I want you to open up a Google Sheet, and I want you to write hook, and then I want you to put an arrow, and then I want you to create a couple lines underneath, and then I want you to do story, and then I want you to do lesson, future pace, question, action, call to action. And now I want you to fill out what you would put in for the next episode. That's the action. So the action is something that you're actually going to do differently based on this episode. And then the last thing is the call to action. So a call to action can be many, many, many different things. Say, for example, you told that story and the lesson on confidence, and you had a 5-part freebie PDF on confidence. You could say, if you're trying to level up your confidence, download this free PDF, the 5 ways to become the most confident version of yourself. That could be your call to action. For me today, it'll be something different. We'll talk about next level podcast solutions or something. So my call to action today won't be directly connected to the episode. It'll be something completely different. But okay, let's say this. If I had a PDF created that had hook, story, lesson, future pace, question, action, call to action, if I had that, my call to action would be click the link in the show notes and download that free PDF so you can make sure that your next episode is the most valuable one yet. That would be my call to action. All right. So I'll walk through them again quickly. Number 1, hook. This is the one sentence, one word, one line, whatever it is, one thought that is going to hook your listeners. And they're going to say, that is something that I want to listen to. That is something that I want to dive into. An important understanding. When people are listening to podcasts, honestly, when they're making any decision, they have one of 2 thoughts. They either say, so what, or me too. So what? That does not apply to me, or me too. That is something that I can use in my life. That is something that resonates with me. That's something I could find value in. I will at some point do an episode on the power of important titles, because when we talk about hooks, a hook is something that you can put in your title that will hopefully inspire more people to click on it. The importance of titles in the grand scheme of things is way, way, way bigger than I think most people realize, myself included up until the very, very recent past. All right, so hook, what is going to get people to click on this? And then what is going to get people to stay? How can I hook them with something creative, something interesting, and something that's making them curious? It'll make them curious enough to stick around. Okay, hook. Story. What is the story that this lesson came from? Why did I decide to do this episode? What is the story on it? Cool. Awesome. Lesson. That is the value. That is the goods. That's the goods. That's the value. That's the thing that they're going to learn, that they're going to take with them. Awesome. Future pace. Your life will look like this if you implement this. Okay. Awesome. Action. Question. What can you do differently starting today? So if this episode was to end right now, could you do these 3 things and get some sort of progress based on that? That's your question. Action. I want you to come up with the framework for your next episode based on what I talked about today. And then the call to action, download the free PDF in the show notes. So that is how we set up all of our solo episodes. Now, do we always go on that? No. Sometimes we just do more of a freestyle. But again, we've done it so many times where I just realized the importance of a powerful story. Story is such an underutilized form of education or communication. And one of the things that I've noticed is some of the best podcasters, or I'll speak to some of the clients that we have that have the best results, are the best storytellers. And I do not believe that is a coincidence. So hook, story, lesson, future pace, question, action, call to action. Write those down. Next time you're coming up with a solo episode, sit down, have those written out and say, okay, well, what is the hook? What is going to get people to stay? And go through that entire process and see how it works for you. Maybe that's not the way you do your episodes. Maybe you're more of a natural storyteller and you just want to tell long stories and connect the dots that way. This has worked really well for us, especially early on when it's very difficult to remember what you said. It's very challenging to say, wait, did I already say that? Did I say that again? Did I say that twice? It's challenging. And especially if you're somebody who doesn't get into flow when you're recording, you're overthinking what you're saying and you're you're not remembering what you said before and you forgot what you wanted to say after. It's just easy to have a little framework in front of you with your notes. Don't be afraid to look at it. It's okay. Just like if you were interviewing somebody, you might look at the questions. That's totally fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the ultimate goal is to improve to the point where you don't have to do that. But if you saw me, I was looking at it because I want to make sure I hit every point. And there was still a couple times where I didn't speak perfectly. So there's always room for improvement. My goal will always be to lead by example through that because, again, I am by no means perfect. I will make mistakes just like everybody else, but that is par for the course. And I had a mentor say this one time. I did an interview, or I told my story, actually. He said, tell me your full story. And I told my full story on camera for the first time ever. And after we got done, he said, what do you think? And I said, I think I did pretty well. And he's like, good. That's the worst you'll ever do it. And I was like, what? And he said, well, it's the first time you've ever told it. That's most likely the worst you'll ever do it. And that's an empowering thought. So understand in the beginning, that's when you're going to make the most mistakes. And you'll always make mistakes, but you'll get better at making mistakes. All right, podcast people. So you don't know this yet because I haven't mentioned it yet. I wanted to get a few episodes in. I wanted to get this thing rolling before I started talking about it. But if you are somebody who is looking to grow your podcast, you're looking to monetize your podcast, or you're looking to make it a bigger part of your business, we have a department called Next Level Podcast Solutions. And that is the main thing that I put my time into. I am spending a lot of time coaching podcasters. We have an amazing production team who does audio editing and video editing and show notes and all this amazing stuff. If you're a podcaster and you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to do this audio editing anymore. It's just, I don't know how to do it. It takes so much of my time, and it's one of the reasons I don't know if I want to be a podcaster long term. I don't really want to do that anymore. I want to find somebody who's really good at that, who enjoys doing it. We could do that for you. Video editing, same thing. So this is the thought. You record an episode. You drop your episode into a shared Google Drive with our team. Our team takes your audio and your video, if that's what you want. We do all the audio editing. We do all the video editing. We post it to YouTube. We post it to all the podcast platforms. And you get some pieces of micro content that you can share on your social media. So it is a done-for-you process for people who want more time. They want to be in front of the microphone and they want to record their episodes, but they don't necessarily want to be behind the scenes doing the other stuff, or they don't have the time to do it because they have a business or whatever it may be. So if that is ever anything you're interested in, please just let me know. I will put a link in the show notes for the landing page, Next Level Podcast Solutions. We also do coaching, whatever it may be. We try to treat it like a buffet. So if you're somebody who says, I'd like help setting up my podcast, I don't know how to do all that, I can help you with that. That's an hour call. We can do that. Or I'm looking for somebody to consult on my podcast. We also do that. When I say we, I mean I do that. But we have an amazing team who can do all the audio editing, all the video editing, all that happy jazz, if that is ever something you are ever interested in. All right, podcast growth, as always, if you want to reach out to me, please just send me a DM on Instagram at NeverQuitKid. That is the best place. You can follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those places, but Instagram is the best. If you ever have any questions about anything I talk about here or just anything in general, do not ever hesitate to send me a message. I can't promise I'll get back to you the same day, but I do my own social media and it's my goal to get back to people when they message me. And I'm not going to try to sell you on anything. I'm not going to say, hey, you got to pay for that. I just want to help people get to the next level. That is my goal. And that is my goal behind starting this podcast, genuinely. We've learned a lot in our 1,000 episodes, and I wish I had a podcast to follow from the very beginning about somebody who was doing what we were trying to do. So that is my goal with that, and every single week I'm trying to I want to bring things that everybody needs, but I also want to bring some interesting stuff, some interesting, unique topics. So in the future, I'm looking at becoming a better interviewer for an episode. What do you do after you drop your episode? So how do you actually promote an episode? Building your podcast family. I believe community is one of the most important things in the world when it comes to podcasting. Why you should treat your podcast like a business. The most common mistakes I see from podcasters. Should you do solo episodes, guest episodes, or both? Those are some of the episodes I have coming down the line. I just want to make sure that I'm adding value. So that is always the goal. So next week, you will hear for episode number 5, Becoming a Better Interviewer. So I was on 25 podcasts last week. And I'm learning so much from seeing other podcasters and the way they interview, seeing the things that really jumped off the page as very positive for me, and then also seeing things that jumped off the page as kind of negative. And I will try to bring you as many of those lessons as possible. And hopefully together we can help you level up your interviewing skills so you will feel competent and you'll feel confident, and that'll be something that you are ready and excited to do. As always, I appreciate you all very much, and let's get podcasting. I'll talk to you on the next episode.